Welcome. We've been running a quite tight schedule right after our meditation. It was a mistake of mine to have meditation and then discussion because we need more than 1.5 hours for meditation. So today we are going to talk about how to deal with disappointment, right? It was about disappointment and uncertainty. So we were going to talk about disappointment and uncertainty. And again, like what we have been doing all these following weeks, we don't want to just skim from the top and just look at uh, the the easiest link that we can find. We want to get to the bottom of it and see why these things happen to us. And again, we are not doing anything unnatural. We are trying to sort of analyze and then look in hindsight, why do we feel certain things, what's the primary purpose of living, why did you come here today. That's what we are trying to figure out. And so then it's not a quick fix. We are trying to look into the mechanism of how to deal with disappointment, or why disappointment happens, why uncertainty and disappointment is there in this existence. So in doing that, we looked at the primary causes of the life, and then we found that we like being happy. We don't want to be unhappy in life. We want to avoid things which makes us unhappy and get closer to things which makes us happy. So again, if I say that the primary cause or the primary driver of life, what if I say it's the desire? Is that right? Desire to be happy, be free, blissful. And this desire, in fact, if you look at any living being in this world, be it a tree, be it a raccoon that you just saw, be it anyone, be it a microorganism, everyone has this desire to survive and to exist, be, but not in the most uncomfortable manner, but in the most comfortable, happy manner. Any animal, even a tree, they want to bloom the way they want. They don't want to be in a place that they don't want to be. If the sun is blocked, they would grow away from that shadow and go into a place where there's sun is, or the roots would go towards the water. So they have this desire, consciously or unconsciously. Now, as humans, as animals, maybe we can think about it, about our desires. But maybe certain microorganisms, probably they don't feel the same way that we feel. They don't perceive or have a conscious sentientness that we have. But they unconsciously have this need for survival, and it's built it seems as in they were built based on a desire where they are propelled towards finding these happy parts or the comfortable parts. And then when we looked at it, we saw that as a result of this desire, there's pleasure that we can immediately see. When we seek for things, we become happy. Now, for example, you came here to meditate. I don't know if you're disappointed or happy, but usually when you do something like that, you become happy. So the desire drives you, and when you get it, when you obtain it, when you can acquire what you were looking for through that desire, you have the pleasure. So pleasure seems to be something which is happening now, and the desire seems to be something which is geared towards the future. Desire is now, but the objective of desire is towards the future. But the pleasure is happening right now. We can't experience the pleasure from yesterday. We can think about the pleasure from yesterday and think about it now, and we have the pleasure right now. Or we can think about a pleasure which is going to happen tomorrow and be happy about it now. But usually the pleasure is right now. But the desire, that driving force, it's now for sure, but that's directed towards the future, not towards the past. It's always directed towards the future. So pleasure and desire are quite intertwined, right? And we also discovered that we were talking about happiness, and then we were talking about peacefulness, something which is a little beyond that, or we could say satisfaction, content, gratified. That's not just mere happiness. the dopamine based happiness, something more long term. And then we also discussed a third term called the blissfulness. We were not trying to give a definition for that, but we were discussing happiness versus the peacefulness, content. And what I'm trying to tell you repeatedly for the last, this is the 5th day, is that what we are trying to do, the methodology has a small flaw. We are not trying to do the right thing. That's the fundamental problem with the existence. The existence is perfect, but there's a fundamental problem that what we are trying to do is it does not add up. And I'm trying to highlight that issue with us. Take the system that we have when we inhale and exhale. We were doing that a lot. When we inhale and exhale, there's an oxygen delivery system to our cells. Now, we could say that's a perfect system, it's quite good, but it's not a foolproof system, right? Have you heard that during winters, people get trapped in the basements, in garages, and they inhale carbon monoxide and they die? In fact, if you inhale carbon monoxide, you can die quite fast. What happens is the oxygen delivery system through the inhalation, it picks up the oxygen molecule, binds it with hemoglobin, and then it's called oxyhemoglobin. It is then delivered, transported to the cell, so the cell can breathe, literally. But what happens is carbon monoxide has a higher power to, it has a higher affinity to get attached to the hemoglobin cell, and then it would overtrump the oxygen, and then it would take charge, and then it would go to the cell, so the cell dies. So our breathing system, oxygen delivery mechanism is not 100% foolproof. I took that example. The methodology, the mechanism that we try to employ to become happy has the same flow. It looks like it's working, but probably you're listening to this because you have figured that something is not adding up. That's why you want to come to this discussion. So let's look into that. So we have the sadness, we have the happiness. I'm not going to talk about the sad part here. Everyone knows that the sad part is sad, and I'm going to talk about the happy part. I'm also purposely doing that because there's this notion, especially for Buddhism, that Buddhism is about suffering. And personally, I hate suffering. I don't want you to suffer, and I don't want you to teach about suffering. So I want to teach you about happiness. And so that's all there. And the lesson that we can get out of all this is that we were doing something for happiness for our life, all our life, but let's try to take a break and then see it if we are doing it right. Let's try to analyze it, let's try to look in hindsight, and let's take a break and let's try to see if there's a right way of doing that. And in order to do that, the only prerequisite you need is that first of all you need to be sentient, you need to have a mind. That's only when you can do it. The second thing is you need to have a little bit of free time. In fact, the meditation that we do is to find that time without any distraction. We are trying to slow down the chatter in our mind, inside our mind. That's what we are trying to do. And back in the day, in ancient India, people have divided their life into four parts. Suppose that you live for 100 years or 80 years, you'd be having 20 years, 4 parts of 20 years. So the first part of your life, you'll be learning. You'll be learning the like a kid would do. You'll be learning, and then the next 20 years, you'll be working. You'll be getting married. You'll be making children, and then comes the third quadrant, 40 to 60. That time you'll be leaving your domestic duties, and then you'll be going to an ashram, trying to do voluntary work, help other people, and you live a semi-lay life. And then there's the fourth part called the sannyasi part, where you completely leave your lay life and then become a monk, or literally an ascetic like me, and then go on your own path of finding your own purpose, liberation, moksha, enlightenment, whatever you call it. So this has been the setup, and I think it's a quite nice setup to have, because when we are young, we try out a lot of things. And when we hit a certain age, we know that doing that over and over again is futile. It's nothing but rat race. So back in the day, the society was geared that you automatically have from 60 to 80 to fully involve with your spirituality, right? So that practice was there. And you might think, well, it's easy back in the day, but now it's so hard because even at our old ages, we have to pay our bills and we have a lot of things to do, right? And we have our commitments that we can't leave. Let me tell you one thing. When I was getting ordained, I was a lecturer at the time. That was my last job. I was teaching some engineering students, and I had 500 papers to be marked. And when I came and became a monk, I could not finish everything which was on my plate. In fact, you will never be able to finish everything you have in your life. All the to-do lists cannot be ticked. When you die, I'm sure that there will be a few which are unticked, unchecked, right? So what I did was I just brought the exam papers and I said to my head monk, I'm going to be a monk, and after becoming a monk, I'll mark the papers. But I didn't have to do that. One of my colleagues said, I'll do it. But what my point is that I took a little bit of time before getting ordained to wait until I finish everything. And then I figured it's not possible to humanly finish everything and do anything. If you want to meditate, if you want to find the path of enlightenment, do it right now. There's no way that you can wait until everything is finished and then start it. It's not going to happen that way. But having said that, you also have your duties. I'll tell you another Zen story. One day, a Zen monk came on a horse, and then he came in, and then he tied his horse. Like back in the day, when you go to a hotel or a motel back in the day, I don't know what they were called back in the day. So a resting place, you will tie your horse on that little pole in front. So the pole was full. There were many horses tied to that pole. So what he did was he took a chair and tied that big horse on the chair, and then he went inside, and then he slept the whole day, and then came back. The following morning when he came back, the horse was still there, and suddenly he came across this thought: this horse is so strong, but he's just tied down to this chair, and he didn't move the entire night. He could have easily gone away, but he did not do. He did not do that. And that's the same way that I am so attached to this world. It's nothing but a simple string or a rope which is attached to a chair, not even a sturdy pole. And that's why I'm not going. So many things that I think which I cannot leave, which I cannot go away, are in my mind. That's what he realized. And again, I'm not trying to tell you this to evade responsibility, duck responsibility. We need to be responsible for certain things. But then again, we also need to prioritize what we really need in life, right? Sometimes. And spirituality is something that I believe that you should not skip. So having said that, then we looked at the previous week, we looked at a very nice sutra or a discourse from the Pali Canon. It's a discussion which Buddha had called Nibbedika Sutta. What it means is that we looked at this thing. It specifically said sights. The question which was asked from Buddha was, what is sensual pleasure? Or what is karma? Karma is the name given for sensual pleasure. It's very straightforward and upfront. Sensual pleasure is karma. And then Buddha says, sights perceived by the eye that are likable, that are desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual and arousing, they are not sensual pleasures. Hang on. Sights perceived by the eye, sounds perceived by the ear, smells perceived by the nose, tastes known by the tongue, touches known by the body, which are likable, desirable, pleasant, sensual, they are not sensual pleasures. Does that make any sense? They are not sensual pleasures, but they are mere ingredients or karma guna for sensual pleasures. Now, it might sound very simple, or maybe I don't know if you understood it. The pleasure, when we were discussing about the happiness and the characteristics of happiness, we always saw that the happiness usually is based on what we acquire from our five senses. We can become happy by listening to a song. We can be happy by looking at a beautiful sight or a beautiful person. We can be happy by a nice aroma, a nice taste when we indulge ourselves with the cuisine, nice things when we eat. That's a taste, or the comfort in our body. So it seems that the happiness is coming from outside, from those things, or from those five senses. But here it says the pleasure is not really those five senses or what we get from five senses. They are just mere ingredients, stimulants. They are nothing but stimulants. The real pleasure is cooked up in here, right? And that's very simple. But then we took the example, this is wood. This doesn't look food to me, but to a termite it might look food. So it has nothing to do with what I have in my mind, right? I can't eat the wood. So there's a physiological or a physical part which is favorable for each being. For a beaver, it's one. For a human, it's one. But within that range, there are things which are totally cooked up in my mind, right? So the five senses are nothing but ingredients. The pleasure happens really inside our mind. We use the word sankappa rago purisassa kamo, which is in Pali, which literally means the happiness, the pleasure, and this whole karma, the sensual pleasure, is nothing but a conceptual thing which happens inside your mind, right? Again, now try to look into this deeply and try to see if it's really true. Is there anything coming from outside, or is it true? Don't accept this. Don't accept it because I'm saying it. Just try to have your own discussion when you go home, when you get back, and see if it's really true. Is sound just a sound, or is sound the pleasure? We need to clearly distinguish between the stimulant, the ingredient, and the pleasure. Are they the same, or are they two different things? And how we approached in order for me to validate that, justify that, I took many examples. What I did was I told that each person has different tastes. When given the same perfume, not everyone likes the same perfume. They have different tastes in perfume. They have different tastes in tastes. They have different taste in fashion. How come that happen? If it's coming from the eye, or the stimulation from the eye, from the ear, it has to be common for everyone. Like, for example, the nature of poison, nature of potassium cyanide, which is a highly potent thing that which would kill you in seconds. Everyone will die because of potassium cyanide, regardless of what you think. But images, everyone can be slightly differently aroused, pleasured, based on different images. So there's something which doesn't add up here. And I want you to look into this nature, not because I'm saying that, just relate it to your experience and see if it's true. And the next part we found is that we think that the pleasure is sourced from outside, but it seems the pleasure is really being cooked up in here, right? And now then there's a problem. All of life, in order to be happy, we were focused outwards. Now, if you think properly, maybe that's not the case, and maybe the way we were trying to become happy is fundamentally wrong, and maybe that's why we have this unsatisfaction, right? So let's figure that out. So that's what I have been telling. And then I also told you the great tragedy of Oedipus, King Oedipus. I hope you remember, and you know the great tragedy of King Oedipus. What I wanted to show there is that when we perceive a lady, let's call her Jennifer. There's no Jennifer here. Let's call her Jennifer. Now, Jennifer's husband would perceive Jennifer one way. Her boss would perceive her in a different way. Her child differently. Her parents differently. Someone who's really mad at Jennifer differently. But it's the same Jennifer But different people perceives Jennifer completely differently. For one person, she's very beloved. For another person, she's extremely hated. We can't even stand Jennifer. I'm sure that there's no Jennifer here, right? Sorry. So, so King Oedipus was the same story. Based on what you think, how you opt to look at a person, a place, a, a possession, or a pastime, it completely changes. What you think, what you feel completely changes. So then, instead of trying to find happiness from outside, let's now try to figure out a different way of how to become happy from inside, within, right? And then a very common example given by most of the Oriental philosophies to show this nature of mind is called Maya. Now, Maya literally means a dream or a illusion, right? What they suggest is that most of the Oriental philosophies, Vedic philosophy, Buddhism, Jainism, they all say that the world fundamentally is illusion. There's an illusion in it. It's almost like it's a dream. The dreams are not real. So what this says is that what we see is not real. Now we need to understand when we say that it's not in a physiological sense. It's not talking about the physical sense of not being real. What we perceive is clouded with our concept. That's what it says. It doesn't say that this mouse doesn't exist. That's not what it's saying. For a person who knows how to use this mouse, it completely makes sense that it's a mouse. But imagine that we bring down a bushman from deep down Kalahari, Africa. For him, this does not make any sense, right? So both of us are seeing the same image. The same amount of photons are getting into our eyes and the retina. It's the same. But I know that this is a mouse. You know that this is a mouse. But for him, it's a weird looking thing, right? So that's why what we see here seems very real, but the way we perceive is very much based on what we have already fed our brain, our experiences that we have gained over the years, and what we believe that what this item would do or what this person would do. So that's why it suggests that the whole world is like a dream. It has this illusionary nature. It's not completely real. But it sounds again very simple. I don't even need to tell you this sounds very simple. But if we truly get it, I don't think we'll go through all the agony, all the emotions, all the dissatisfaction that we would usually go through, right? There's a great Zen story. I'm sure that you have heard that story. One day there was a Zen master who another student wanted to learn from this master. So he went and said, teacher, I want to learn your Zen. And he said, okay, our tradition is we offer a cup of tea first when you come to the temple, like I do after meditation all the time. So he said, let's have tea. So he kept a cup in front of the student, another cup in front of him, and then he started pouring tea. He poured tea until the tea was overflowing. And the student said, teacher, stop it. You are not doing it right. The tea is overflowing. And then the teacher said, I did that to show you that your mind is also like that. Now, most of the time, the meaning taken out of that is that you can't teach something to someone who's so full of himself. That's the more superficial meaning. When you're know-it-all, it's hard to teach you, right? But the deeper meaning is that even if we are the most humble person, still our mind is filled with so many conceptions, prejudices, and it's so hard to completely empty our mind and look at the world completely new. It's impossible. It's an impossible thing to do. Now I'll tell you an easy way to figure that out. There's a statue of Buddha here, and there are flowers that you can see in the background on Zoom also. Now, out of the statue of Buddha and out of the flowers, which is the most tough when you touch it? The flowers or the Buddha? Obviously, the Buddha should be more harder. The flowers are softer. But except for one person here, she went and touched the flowers. No one else here went and touched the flowers. No one else touched the Buddha. So you don't know whether it's cement, it's fiberglass, or even metal, because you haven't touched it. But you have a notion that it has to be tougher than the flowers. It has to be harder than the flowers, right? Maybe it's made out of sponge. We never know because we never touched it. But again, you are right. The statue is harder than the flowers. But the problem is not whether you are right or wrong. The problem is your thinking, right? You simply take this assumption because you have touched flowers earlier, these flowers are also going to be the same. And that's the fundamental mistake that we do in our thinking. We think that things are a continuum, things don't change. And that is what I'm going to touch today about the certainty and the uncertainty in the world, right? So then, having said that, I also want you to know another very interesting word that we find in the Pali Canon. If you ever read it, the word is called Chanda. Chanda literally means, not Canada, Chanda. Chanda literally means impulses or excitement, intention, motivation, something which is closer to desire. Chanda. Now, Chanda in Sri Lanka, in my language, my native language, Chanda means the vote. Right, when you have to vote to select a politician, you cast your vote, and it's called the Chanda. So Chanda literally means that your vote, that your preference, that your liking. That's what Chanda means. And why I want to talk about Chanda is because today our discussion is about disappointment, and I want to show how this Chanda, or the motivation, desire, is linked to disappointment, right? And let me ask you another very simple question from Zoom. What do you think is the most common reason for divorce in Canada? Who could tell me? What is the most common reason for divorce in Canada? What's the cause? Many problems? Money? Okay. Yeah. Good one. Money problems. What else do you think could be the biggest factor for divorce?
Disappointment.
Disappointment? You are not happy with each other? Yeah.
Or infidelity.
Infidelity? Other people getting involved? Money? Disappointment? We don't simply match? There are many reasons. But now I will tell you the most powerful reason for divorce in Canada. There's only one reason. That's because you get married. Now it might sound like a joke, and that's the same thinking that we have when we look into these other problems which are associated with our pleasure, dissatisfaction, etc. Right? Again, it sounds like a joke, but I'm saying the deeper meaning of that. The reason for getting divorced is because you have married someone. If you were, like, for example, I was divorced earlier, but now I will never get divorced because I am never married. I'm a ascetic monk, right? So again, I'm not talking about divorce here, I'm just taking the example of it, okay? When only we desire, when we want to get something, that we can be disappointed about not getting it, right? I want to have an ice cream and I was disappointed because when I take a walk down here, there's this, I don't know, past Gold, past Cambridge, there's this place which comes up during summer. It's a train which is now converted to an ice cream shop. And last time I walked, it was closed. Even if it was spring, it was closed. I was almost disappointed. But then I realized I am disappointed because I had expected it. Had I not expected it, I would never be disappointed. In fact, everything which happens to me would be only bonuses. It would be only good things happening to me because I never expect and I never get disappointed. In fact, that's the credo of my life. I don't expect. I just live and everything comes as a bonus to me. And it's very hard for me to get disappointed, even with food. Right? So Now you know the uh, fundamental truth behind the disappointment. But let's try to dig deep into that. Now, the reason for um, you being disappointed is because you started liking something, but then it becomes it's more complicated than simply saying that, because we have attributed our desires always to the outside world, while this desire is made inside, right? We never think that it's going to it has nothing to do with the outside. We always think that it always has something to do with the outside, because our desire or our pleasure, they come from the sounds, tastes, touches, beautiful images, right? So it's always towards outwards. It's never that we take a step back and look inward. So in a way, in yogic philosophy, in oriental philosophy, you might come across this thing called the third eye, right? Some even say you get a third eye right here on the forehead. But really, this third eye is to not look outside. Our other two eyes are to look outside. This third eye is to look inside. When I say inside, that's not inside the body, but inside your mind, the works of your mind, your consciousness, right? So third eye means that. And now let's see how I again, in the beginning I said there are two conditions that a person would live without committing suicide. One is happiness, the other one is hope, right? So today we are talking about more or less the hope part of it, or the desire part of it, or the expectation part of it. And when we become hopeful, there's this very tricky thing that we do. We are not hopeful of everything. We are quite cunning in a way. There are certain justifiable hopes and unjustifiable hopes. For example, we never hope that the sun would rise from the north, right? We never hope for that. We never hope that every child should be born equal, equal height. We have to be equal. We don't hope for that. We want to treat everyone equally, but we don't expect people to be born equally. They have differences, and certain hopes, they are justifiable. Certain hopes are completely unjustifiable, like for example, sun coming from the north, or being able to grow corn during winter, not justifiable, right? And if we look into how we create these expectations, is that we most of the time create expectations just because they are recommended by our closest friend, right? Our best friend when we were young said, why don't you watch this movie, why don't you do this sport, why don't you do this, usually it's either our parents, our friends, or our relatives, or the society. They suggest us things. Advertisements, they suggest us things. Why don't you buy this over this, right? They keep suggesting you. Sometimes you don't even have the need, they create you the need. I used to work for a company, big multinational company brand. Our department was called, not marketing, generating demand. Because what we had to do is we had to generate demand where people did not want that in the first place. We had to generate that demand. And we wanted to make sure that we would capture them in the most correct timing. When they are quite tired, when they are exhausted, we show them a fizzy drink with bubbles, cold, and they feel like they are desirous to consume it, generating demand, right? So the expectations we have are usually through TripAdvisor, through Google reviews, all these peer reviewed recommendation sites. In fact, if you go to Netflix, right, you would find the top 10 movies which are watched in Canada. You did not want to watch them, but you you click them because that's what's on your home screen. You go to YouTube. The YouTube home screen is based on the algorithm that YouTube wants to push to you. It's based on your patterns also. It does not mean that you don't have anything to do with it. It has your nature in it also. But then YouTube also wants to push certain ideas to you, and those are the ones which appears on your home page when you go to YouTube every day in the morning, right? They're not random. So expectations are created that way. And the second part is that these expectations are created through our experiences. Obviously, the way we experienced, we have, we have tasted something. It was so good. I want to eat it again. I listened to this music. It was so beautiful, and I want to listen to it again. It was soothing. It was calming. I went through this experience, so I want to recreate that experience. If I go through an experience which I don't like, I do not want to recreate it. I want to get away from it. But if I like a experience that I have already experienced, I want to get it again. Now the problem with this is that we experience things from our five senses, and our five senses are naturally flawed again. Like that oxygen delivery system, our eye is not perfect. Now, why? What I mean by our eye is not perfect is that the scientists say that we have electromagnetic waves in the universe, and light happen to be a small strip of these electromagnetic waves. So electromagnetic waves are X-rays, gamma rays, ultraviolet, infrared, light, which is visible. So out of all these um, vibrations, we only see the light which is visible to us. But then there are so many things that we don't see. For example, a moth or a butterfly would see the world differently. He sees the world in ultraviolet. A dog would see the world in infrared, or a cat. But we see the light spectrum that we can see, and then we call it real. That's real, right? So naturally, there's a problem with our equipment. We can't see everything. And when we get into a conclusion about this is what I should expect, it's naturally going to be a partially wrong expectation, right? And on top of that, the conclusions that we make based on these five senses, they are most likely wrong. They might be applicable to a certain range, right? For example, if we take classic physics, Newtonian physics and Einstein's physics, they are two different things. Our vehicles run, the dynamos rotate. That happens because of Newton. It was correct. But according to Einstein, many things that Newton said are not correct. They are wrong. For example, gravity. The explanation Newton gave for gravity is completely wrong as per Einstein. And then came the quantum physics. They said Einstein is also wrong. So you keep digging, you find a different reality, right? But it doesn't mean that to our day-to-day work, it's not sufficient. It's sufficient. It has a utility value. But what I wanted to say is that expectations that we make can be naturally wrong because the information we get are naturally distorted. They are not the most accurate. It is totally dependent on the accuracy of our equipment. Our equipments are eye, ear, nose, taste, and the touch, right? And the other part is that these expectations are made internally, and we are looking for things which are naturally not in that particular object. I'll take an example. I'll take that glass of potassium cyanide, which is very potent. You're going to die. But regardless of whatever you think about it, it has the property of poison in it, right? So when you consume it, you're going to die regardless of what you think. But if you take a nice music or a nice image that you want to see, or a nice movie, it is not in the movie. It is in how you look at the movie. Is that correct? Now it's very tricky to distinguish the difference. The niceness or the desirable nature or the pleasure that I get from the music is not in the music. Music is just a vibration, right? It just passes through your brain, passes through your eardrum, and then we give it meaning based on how you want to give meaning. It would be a pleasurable thing or a displeasurable thing, right? So in a way, with these expectations, we are expecting happiness, pleasure from things which necessarily does not contain happiness or pleasure. Again, the example given in many Oriental philosophies is that it's like you are trying to milk a cow on its horn, from its horn, not its udder. When you try to milk it, it doesn't happen because it does not have that quality. So certain things in life, like poison, They have a quality which is inherent, there's a property which is real there. But happiness is not an inherent property in the sound, in the image, in the taste, in the noise, in the image, right? So if you do not think it is the case, let's discuss about it towards the end of this discussion, right? And then about these expectations again. The next part of these expectations is that we have a very limited control over the world, right? For example, we know we do not have control over what's happening at Ukraine with Russia. We have very limited control. We can put a Facebook or an Instagram post saying, I do not like it. But that's pretty much it, unless you are the president of a nation, right? Even if you are the president of Premier of Ontario, president of Canada, there's so much you can do about it. You can send the troops, you can send some support, but they are still going to fight it, right? But then you have much more control over Canada. You can vote for it, you can select the president, you have much more control over your province, you have much more control over your neighborhood, you have much more control over your house. But still, do you think you have 100% control over any of those things? No, right? I mean, a hurricane could come, could totally take our home, whether we think it's under our control or not, it would be gone. Now, those are the physical objects. How about the closest person who's next to you? Your son, daughter, husband, wife, the closest partner. Do we have control over them? Most likely no. even when the kids are really young, we still don't have control over them. Maybe when they're infants, maybe we might have more control, but the moment they are big enough, we have no control over them. Do we have control over our body? Can we stop aging? Can we stop getting tired? Can we not breathe for 8 counts? We were just doing that during meditation. So this is what meditation is trying to teach you, right? It seems like we are doing a completely unrelated thing, but the meditation is really trying to teach you this truth, right? Our body is simply not under our control. It doesn't mean that our body is not completely under our control. There is a portion of control. We can exercise control. For example, I can lift my arm. It's under my control. But the next moment, if I get a stroke and if I fall down in front of you, do I have control of it? No, that I don't have. Can I stop my aging? Can I stop getting hungry? My thirst? No. So we don't have full control over anything. How about our mind? Do we have control over our mind? What do you think? Can we control our mind? Can we try to only keep our mind on one thought, which is the sensation we get when we are walking meditation? Impossible, right? Almost impossible. We are trying to go there, but it seems it's very hard. It's very hard. Probably not right now. So then what is really under my control in this world? Not much. There are certain things which appears to be under control, but again you can find an example that even the thing which seems to be most under our control is gone out of our control. So in a way, we really can't expect anything to work the way we want, period. If we expect that, that will be quite wrong, right? I mean, we don't think about it the same way we don't think whether this is hard or soft. We just simply ignore that fact. This is a very simple fact, very simple reality. There's absolutely nothing in this world that we can expect which has to be according to our wish, and the expectation should come true all the time. It's not simply possible in this world. That's the nature of this world. Sometimes it might look as if it went according to you, but who knows, maybe God decided, well, today I'm going to let him think or her think that his wish is fulfilled, but it's really, I want to do something else with you. Or maybe it's karma, or maybe it's randomness in the world. We don't know the true reason, but it seems like it went according our way. But truly, if we expect anything to go according our way, that would be a completely wrong thing to do. Now that I have said all that, And um, what we lose in our thinking is that we don't look at things in this balanced view. We only we are used to think in a particular manner. We don't think that expecting things is fundamentally wrong. Of course we can expect things, but it does not mean that it's going to be fulfilled the way you wished all the time. It's very natural. It's very natural, like the sun is setting and rising. It's very natural, like the winter and summer. It's very natural for things to go unexpected ways, not the way you like. It's perfectly normal and natural. So uncertainty is a pretty much a fundamental part in our universe, in our nature. But what happens is that we don't want to accept this uncertainty. We want our world, we want our environment, our surrounding to be conditioned. That's why we even have air conditions. We want to condition it. We want to make sure that this would happen the way I wish for it. It simply can't happen that way. I told you many reasons. Our equipments are flawed. Expectations are nothing but some things which are in here. It's not really on the image or the sound or the taste. And then the nature of the world is that it's fundamentally uncertain. It's not permanent. It's ever changing, and it has its own agenda. Every cell in our body has its own agenda. I can't control the way my nails are growing. The nail cell has its own agenda. He will do what he wants to, right? Our kid, our partner, our presidents, they would do what they want. Of course, we are going to influence them to a certain extent, but we do not have full control. So we cannot expect anything to be fully according to the way I want. So, and back in the day, I used to travel to this nice beach in Sri Lanka, and it's a very famous beach where kids come and build sand castles. That's what kids do during the summer, right? And I also happened to see a nice beach in the Philippines. They have this beach called the Boracay Beach, where they have a sand castle festival, like beautiful sand castle festival. It's a major tourist attraction there. Every year, the sand castles are different. Why? Because the previous year's sand castles are washed away, right? Now, these sculptures, when people build these things, let's take a kid. Let's take a kid who went to the beach for the first time. He's building a castle, and then the water comes, washes it away. He's going to cry. He'll be very upset. But as an adult, the adult won't be that upset. He would say, that's fine. That's the nature of the beach. The waves come, they wash things away. It's not permanent here, right? So don't worry, let's build it again. That's what an adult would say. But a kid would be crying, would be lamenting. He'll be so upset about it. Now, what I want you to think is that, aren't we kids when it comes to certain other things in our life? Now, for example, when we go home today, if our house is washed away, aren't you going to cry? When we walk out of this hall, if the trees has fallen onto your cars, aren't you going to be a little upset? But if I become the adult here and say, it's the nature of the life. It's like shores. It's like the waves on the shore. You build the castle, then they get washed away. You're going to curse at me. But again, that's the fundamental nature of life, right? We advise our kids. We tell them, look, son, daughter, the nature of the beach is that no matter how you build it, the nature is that it will get washed away. It's like that. And the same applies to our day-to-day life as well. We can come up with the best plan, best ambition, best strategy, and create this best expectation. It's very natural that it might not work the way we want. It's very natural it would completely topple over and it would become a major catastrophe. But then again, if you know that this is the nature of the world, and if you have a mind which is a balanced mind, you are not only fixated on that expectation, you also have back in your mind that I expect, but expectations are fundamentally flawed. So anything could happen. So if I go with that view, I would not be that disturbed. I'll be okay. I'll be relatively okay. And if you try to live a life without expectation at all, that will be a very happy life. I will vouch for that. Usually, I don't know what will happen to me in the next 6 months. It's very, I thought I'll be ended up in a different country by now, but it didn't happen. So it's very hard. I stopped planning my life after I became a monk. I don't plan what I eat tomorrow. Of course, there are certain plans I do. For example, I plan for today. But those plans are very minimal, and I completely understand that these plans can go completely, haywire. They can be um, not according to my plan anytime. I could die, you could die, you know, there could be a snowstorm, there will be a power outage. We don't know. It doesn't mean that we should not plan for our life. It does not mean that we should not expect at all. We can have expectations, but we have to have expectations with a balanced mind. We have to expect, but we have to also know that it might not work the way I like it. So the answer to how to not be disappointed simply is the same answer how to not get divorced. Don't marry. Right? So if you don't want to be disappointed, don't make expectations. But we do not know a way to live without making expectations. So now when you make expectations, make an expectation which is balanced. It could go this way or it could go the other way, right? And so again, what I'm going to talk will revolve around a few things: nature of happiness, why we live, how this happiness is constructed. Let me introduce a word saying how this happiness is fabricated, right? And based on this fabricated happiness, we have desires, we have expectations, and these desires are also going to not be met, right? Our expectations are not going to be met. When they don't happen, we are dissatisfied. When we are dissatisfied, we are not pleased, we are unhappy. So again, if we try to look into all these things, it again boils down to the same thing. A lot of things are happening inside, and we do not know enough about our inside. We know a lot of things about our outsides. We know how the sun works. Hydrogen becomes helium and emits energy. We know a lot about the universe, but we don't know how the inside works. And that's what we are trying to figure out through different techniques of meditation. We are trying to understand the fundamental nature of ourselves, nothing but the truth in here. So with that, I will stop the discussion and uh, uh, open the floor for questions and answers. But one thing I wanted to say: I wish you all develop this third eye so you could look into yourself, right? So with that, please ask any questions you have about what I said today. Is that fair, or do you agree? Please don't agree with me right away. Just have a thought on your own. Because what I just said, for example, the pleasure is not coming from sound, image, smell. Question that. Put that into an experiment. Experiment about it. Really see, when we eat, it makes us happy. But is it the taste or is it something else? Question it, right? I'm just pointing out things. Your role is to experiment. Anything? Yes, Nihal?
Yeah, so I just want to just share my views about what I have learned today, and then going back to your first question. So, answer the question like, why do we live? And also then we try to really analyze really why we are not dying, really, why we are not ready. Some people are ready to die, but we don't want to die at this point. And also today I learned something like that. You talked about the divorce and what is the main reason for the divorce, and then we thought, yeah, right? Then because we got married first, so without a marriage there is no divorce. So that tells me really always there is some duality really. As we see, there is light and the darkness. So if we don't see the darkness, we don't see the light also. And then going back to the question really, so why do we live really? And then so a lot of people give a lot of answers. Then I myself also thought really, why do we live? Because we are born. And then really, so we talk about the death really. We talk about the death. And now really, so since there is always a really duality really, and then we try to understand the death, but before that I thought really that we have to understand our birth also. Why are we born then? And then I say really then why are we living really? So we are living means we are experiencing our life really in between the birth and the death. And we are going through this process that is called really our life really. This is our lifetime. So I think we should really talk about our birth also, and because life ends really when we die, and then as there is a duality, really there is a death and the birth also. So, and then your next question is, I was thinking really a couple of weeks ago also. So why have you joined this discussion? What is the reason really? And then in between, so I was thinking really, so since we are born really, we have to live our life until the death really. And then really, we have been living really, everybody has been living, we have been experiencing something, but always, what I think, and what we believe also others think, that we want to live better really. We want to live our life in a better, we think that there is a better way of living than we live now. So always there is some progression or some development. So that we think that there is always something better than what we know or than what we live. So I think that's the answer for myself joining this discussion. So I want to live better and I want to understand things better. And so that's my sharing about what I have learned so far.
That's very good. That's very good. We'll keep digging, right? We always look for something better. And we just sometimes even don't think what is better. We just go by with the flow. Now let's really try to see what is better and what makes us happy and what is happiness. And then fundamentally, I'm trying to take you to a place. Who are you? That's the most deepest question that I want to ask you on a later day. So, like Nihal mentioned, there's this dualistic nature in our life, right? And we often forget the duality. We are very fixated on one extreme. We don't see the dualistic nature. For example, when we love a person, meeting that person, interacting with that person, getting a message from that person makes us very happy. But the same person has the ability to hurt us the most, right? You cannot be hurt by a person whom you don't love a lot, whom you don't have a respect, love, or an expectation. Only if you expect, for example, you expect me to behave like a monk, and if I behave unmonkly, you'll be very dissatisfied, right? So if you don't expect that, it won't bother you. And if you don't love the person that you love, you will not be happy in a pleasure sense. At the same time, you will not be unhappy also. So this happiness and sadness, I'm not talking about the blissfulness or the peacefulness content. I'm not talking about that. Happiness and sadness are just nothing but two sides of the same coin, and they are intertwined. And when we interact with them, we only look at one part of it, right? And then we'll discuss about this in the next few weeks as well. Yeah. So next week we are not going to meet, but we are going to meet on the 8th Thursday. Meditation will also happen on the 8th. And if you have any questions, just drop a mail, email me. And if you have any questions right now, all good in Zoom? All good? Right? If you need me to talk about or explain certain things, just send me a message. We'll try to figure out what is pleasure, why we came here, why are you spending your time on this beautiful evening, and what is the purpose of your existence? Why do you live, and why don't you? I wish that you don't commit suicide. You don't do that. I asked that question to see why you live really, not to go that way, but to see why we live. And let's try to also figure out who we are. And only one message is left with today's discussion is that we need to go deeper into the works of our mind and understand who we are. When we have an answer for that, maybe then we can crack the code to become eternally happy. Right? So with that message, I will end it for today, and I wish you all the best, and I wish you all be blissful, peaceful, and may attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Good evening.